lab-grown meat for animal science. These are our names and assigned tasks for the project. Not too much to cover here. Okay, now to get into it, we have the statement overview of the topic. So our topic for this project is meat production from cellular culture, otherwise known as lab-grown meat. And just a kind of basic overview, it's just where culture of animal cells, then become the meat rather than raising the cow and slaughtering it. And so there's a few sources of controversy here. One being how sustainable is it? Some think it's a lower environmental impact, but there's still a lot of question marks there. There's also some high cost and scalability issues. But I'm about to reference that chart in just a second that you see to the right. There's also a lot of health concerns and people just debating the unnatural aspect of it. They think, oh, well, a real cow's healthier. And then some might say, oh, well, we raised this, there's no room for contamination. So people kind of debate either way on that. And there's just with that, a lot of uncertain consumer acceptance, despite the falling costs, which we see to the right. And even the projections in 2030 are a lot lower than the costs currently are. Now for the popular press perspective of the topic. The popular press acknowledges that it is a very innovative, however controversial food solution, as I mentioned in the overview. It is real meat from lab-grown animal cells. There's no slaughter involved in the cultured meat process, which the popular press acknowledges. It also acknowledges some potential and then the barriers of it. So potential, there's obviously less land and water use, and lower emissions as long as you use renewable energy. This is one that I think is going to be heavily overlooked as creating cultured meat. Obviously it takes energy like any production process. And the barriers being high costs, limited availability, and then scaling challenges. So those are all going to be hurdles that would have to be overcome. There's still a lot of political pushback as the livestock industry provides a lot of jobs and careers. So that's one thing that is a source of controversy, and it has to meet a pretty high promise for global protein demand, and then just some more economic and acceptance hurdles. For the peer-reviewed perspective, again, it's pretty similar in the sense that it agrees, that cellular agriculture is real meat from lab-grown animal cells rather than slaughter. And it does focus more on the process being, with growth media and 3D scaffolds for structure and texture. And then for benefits of this process, there's obviously less animal use, no slaughter, and then just less land, water, and then it really hinted at the reduced contamination risk. The peer-reviewed perspective did. It's something it really stressed. In terms of challenges and unknowns, there's obviously the high cost, scaling, and can we find safe and affordable materials? So again, pretty similar with the popular press, but the peer review definitely acknowledged a lot of the unknowns. What are the long-term health effects or the full environmental impact? Because on the surface, it seems like there's less environmental impact, but again, we don't know how much energy it's going to take at a large scale. So these are all issues we have to think about. Promising technology, but it needs some regulation and technical thinking through. For the summary, lab-grown meat is culture cells instead of livestock, and so we can kind of see that whole process in this picture to the right. We have the stem cells, the cell line optimization, then bioreactor expansion, and so on until we get to that final meat product. Hopefully, it's more sustainable meat production. And you can kind of see how the popular press and scientific news differ, where it's innovative but not controversial, or innovative but controversial rather, and then there's going to be some challenges that we hinted at previously. To conclude, it has a lot of potential to transform food productions. There's benefits like less environmental damage to animal suffering. There are some severe barriers, but it needs more research. Overall, consumer acceptance is key. It's a promising step towards sustainability. It's not the complete solution. And scientific and popular press largely agree on most of these points, and here are the sources.